What's up, guys? This is part 2 of my UFC 217 prediction. I'm going to do a breakdown of the main event, the current middleweight champion Michael Bisping versus the returning GSP, how I see the fight playing out, and who's going to win. Stay tuned. Certainly this is not the Anderson Silva GSP matchup we hoped for, but it definitely is interesting, and I'm definitely curious to watch this fight, how it plays out. I'm going to take a look at some of the advantage that each guy has over the other. Just a quick little facts for both guys. They're both nearing 40. It's been 4 years since GSP fought, and it's been about over a year since Michael Bisping fought. And ironically, both their last wins were very, very controversial. Bisping had that very close fight with Dan Henderson. He was busted up pretty badly, and a lot of people thought he actually lost that fight. And so was GSP when Dan Hendricks beat him up pretty badly. So both were coming off wins, controversy, but they walked out champions nonetheless. Starting with number 1, size. I think this is pretty obvious here, but Bisping is definitely going to have the size advantage. Keep in mind, he used to fight at light heavyweight. He won the Ultimate Fighter 3 as a light heavyweight. He has dropped down to middleweight, and I think has been a middleweight for about 10 years now, whereas GSP has been a welterweight his entire career. Bisping is standing about 6'1", and he probably walks around maybe 210, 15 pounds, whereas George St. Pierre is 5'10", and he usually walks around 190 to 195 pounds. He's notorious for cutting 20 pounds in one day to make that 170 limit. For a long time, GSP has refused to go up to middleweight to fight Anderson Silva because he felt that he needed time to make that change, right? To put on that weight properly. So I'm assuming now he has done so. If he can cut 20 pounds, I would say he's probably going to cut about maybe, again, 15, 20 pounds. So on the night of the fight, he's probably going to be around, 200 pounds. Maybe I'll say Bisping's like 205, 210. So I think the weight difference is not going to be as big as people are expecting to be. But the funny thing with the reach is they're both about the same. I mean, George St. Pierre might have a slightly longer reach, so but still the size goes to Michael Bisping. So number 2, let's go with power. Both guys have been accused of having no power pretty much their entire career. But if you take a close look at their records, Bisping has 16 wins by KO or TKO. I mean, he knocked out Luke Rockhold. He stopped Kung Lee with strikes. So he definitely has power in his hands. GSP also, early in his career when it's come to the UFC, man, he was just beasting people until that loss to Matt Serra. But he has also 8 knockouts and TKO finish in his career. But again, Bisping being the bigger, stronger guy, being primarily a striker, I think for sure he's going to have the power advantage on his side. Moving on to number 3, striking. Now, Bisping actually started his career as a kickboxer. He was an amateur champion, a professional champion in the UK. Bisping should have the stand-up advantage. I mean, he's primarily a stand-up fighter. He spends over 50% of his time in the cage on his feet. But if you look at the stats on paper, actually George St. Pierre is the more accurate striker. He lands about 53% of his total strikes. He's also the better defensive fighter. He avoids about 73% of total strikes. And that being said, Bisping is a volume puncher. He's non-stop punching. Whereas George St. Pierre is more calculated. He likes to time his opponents. So it makes sense that he's the more accurate striker on paper, but I still give the stand-up advantage to Michael Bisping. Fight IQ. GSP only lost twice in his entire career. He does an exceptional job of combining his striking with his wrestling. Again, coming from a guy who's never wrestled before, he has the best wrestling in all of mixed martial arts. His timing, his explosion, his ability to stick to a game plan, I think, is exceptional. He has an answer for every opponent. Not only has GSP not lost since 2007, but there was a period where he didn't lose a round. He had the record for the most rounds won. I mean, he had like 30 plus rounds consecutively. So GSP is a very, very smart fighter. Bisping is an intelligent fighter too, but as far as fight IQ goes, I give that advantage to George St. Pierre. Next one is wrestling / grappling. I think this is easy. I think we're all going to agree to give this one to GSP. He lands about 75% of his takedowns, and his defense is fantastic too because he defends about 84% of total takedowns. And his takedown average is 4.2 versus Michael Bisping, who only averages about 1 takedown, and his takedown defense is about 65%. So there's no question that GSP's wrestling, grappling is a lot better, at least on paper, compared to Michael Bisping. Last but not least, pace or cardio. I think, listen, honestly, this is a tie because both these guys are known for their excellent cardio. GSP is always in fantastic shape. He's always training, whether he's fighting or whether he's not fighting, it doesn't matter. Keep in mind that the only time I've really seen GSP get tired was against maybe his last couple of fights. I would say, Hendricks, Condon, Diaz. I think those were some fights where he showed signs of fatigue. But other than that, man, he's always been in phenomenal shape. Now, as far as fighting, at middleweight, I don't know how that's going to affect his cardio. We don't know that yet, but knowing GSP, he's an absolute professional, and I think he's definitely going to come in fight shape. And Michael Bisping, he's always had great cardio. He always pushes the pace. He's a volume striker. He puts the pressure on guys. He keeps going and going and going. So both these guys have great cardios, and I think it's a tie for cardio. So I'll give both of them a check. A couple things. GSP said he's bringing in Freddie Roach to help him prepare for the camp. He's going to be in his corner. I believe the first time Freddie Roach worked with GSP was back at UFC 129 against Jake Shields. And George was trying to throw this weird overhand right hand repeatedly against Shields, trying to knock him out. He has been criticized of being a boring fighter, and I think he really made an effort to knock him out. And this is something we don't see from George. Usually he throws the straight punches, but he was trying to throw overhand right hand against Shields. And he said in this fight that he's bringing in Freddie Roach again, and he has a surprise for Michael Bisping. And I honestly think the surprise is the big right hand, because if there's any fighter that you should throw the big right hand against, it's definitely Michael Bisping. And I'm not talking about his loss to Dan Henderson back at UFC 100. I'm talking about all the fights since then. Akiyama, Dennis Kang, Jorge Rivera, Brian Stann, all of those guys cracked Bisping with the right hand. Now, they didn't have the same damage that Henderson had, but they definitely cracked him. I mean, he was rocked in all those fights by all of those guys. So, definitely, I think George St. Pierre knows that. He sees the weakness. GSP will definitely try to land that big right hand against Michael Bisping. Now, how I see the fight playing out, listen, I said Michael Bisping has a great cardio, but he usually tends to get tired against wrestlers. If you look at his fight against Chael Sonnen, Tim Kennedy, even Mayhem Miller, Bisping showed signs of fatigue after extensive grappling and wrestling and trying to get back on his feet. So my prediction, listen, I think in the first 2 rounds, GSP is going to set his takedowns with his strikes. As always, he has a game plan. He's going to take him down. And I think in the first 2 rounds, Michael Bisping is going to get back to his feet relatively quickly, relatively easy. But as the fight goes on, he's going to get tired. And I think by round 3, round 4, GSP will take him down and he will keep him down on the ground. But I do see him being a grind. I do see Bisping getting back to his feet, landing some good strikes in that first and second round. But I still don't think he's going to finish George St. Pierre in the first round like he said he would. I think this fight's definitely going to go to a decision. I think he's definitely going to get tired as the fight goes on. And I think GSP's biggest success is going to come in round 4 and 5. Spend a lot of time in top control. And I do see him being a decision. I'm going to say 3 rounds to 2. I think Michael Bisping is going to win round 1 and 2. And I think GSP is going to win 3, 4, and 5 to become the new middleweight champion. Now, as far as retirement rumors, listen, both these guys have claimed they're going to retire. GSP said he's going to retire if he loses, which, again, I don't think he's going to lose, but I think if he does lose, like Dana White said, I don't think he's going to go out on a loss. I think he's going to drop down to welterweight and try to go out with a win. I don't see him losing and then retiring with a loss for someone like GSP. Now, as far as Bisping goes, I think he has a couple different options. I think if he wins this fight against GSP, he's going to defend the belt against Robert Whittaker and unify the belt. And if he wins that fight, I think he will retire. Now, if he loses the belt to Robert Whittaker, I think he's going to have one more fight, a farewell fight, probably in Manchester. He's going to try to go out like Uriah Faber and go out with a win in his hometown. Now, if he loses to GSP, he's not going to fight, obviously, Robert Whittaker. But again, I think he's going to have that farewell fight in England, in Manchester. So, depending on how the fight with GSP goes, I do see Bisping having either 2 or 3 fights But again, I don't think he has that many years left in the sport. I definitely don't see him fighting, Yoel Romero or Luke Rockhold or anybody that crazy like that. So that is my prediction, my breakdown, my thoughts on UFC 217. I definitely can't wait to watch it. I'm going to have a fight reaction day after the fight, so make sure you go to my channel and watch that as well. And let me know in the comment section if you think Bisping or GSP is going to retire, and also who's going to win that fight.